Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This morning, Governor Tate Reeves and the fruits of the 2023 legislative session.
Do everything that we can to make sure that we take care of moms and babies in our state.
The governor touts a series of so-called pro-mom bills as he wades through the bills awaiting his consideration. One of those bills could change the dynamics of crime fighting in Jackson. We'll tell you what the governor did with House Bill 1020. And
it's a great example of failure of leadership all the way around.
A special judge rebukes city leadership over the fight over garbage services. We'll hear from Chancellor David Clark in a hearing that set the stage for an emergency deal. It's all ahead this Sunday on Mississippi Insight. The 2023 session is over. The 2023 campaign has already begun. And in the middle stands Tate Reeves, the Republican governor, running for a second term in that office. It was Wednesday when Governor Reeves highlighted his signing of what his office calls pro-mom, pro-life legislation. Those bills include a foster parents' bill of rights, millions of dollars in tax credits for pregnancy resource centers, and an income tax credit for qualified adoption expenses. One bill sets up the State Department of Child Protection Services as its own agency, separate from the Department of Human Services. The governor signed off on what he calls a new pro-life agenda. Following U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs ruling, it's one that he pledges to pursue relentlessly. Governor Reeves took questions and more from reporters.
Governor, could you speak to House Bill 1318 and the baby safety device measure, how you believe that will make an impact in that regard?
Well, we know with the overturning of Roe v. Wade that there are some individual moms that may have made a different decision in the past that now, thank God, have the opportunity to have that baby. But we also know that there are times in the immediate aftermath of childbirth when it may be such that it is just more than a newborn mom can handle. And we want to make sure that we have the ability through the state and through nonprofits and through our church leaders and other opportunities to make sure that these individuals that meet that difficult point, that there is an avenue for that child to be taken care of. And I believe that's the intent. And that is the desire, and I believe in our state we will step up and make sure that happens. Either one of y'all, you want to comment? Good.
Governor, you mentioned that this is not the end. What are your thoughts going into the summer as the legislature possibly has more hearings to discuss what next year's priorities will be?
Well, I will tell you, I think that one of the things that I think is critically important is that we all understand that when the legislature passes a bill or when the governor signs the bill, it doesn't mean that it's, I signed these bills a few minutes ago, and it doesn't mean they're already implemented and funded and done, and so it takes time. And so we all have to, part of my job as governor is to attempt to manage expectations and recognize that that we're not flipping a switch. The laws that are put on the books are not, they're certainly going to be implemented over time, but I think one of the things that Andrea could certainly speak to is in the management of her agency particularly, but this is true of a lot, where we've had a lot of things that we've had to fix over the last 3.5 years. It just doesn't happen overnight. And in the reality is, I think she would agree that when it comes to CPS, we make progress every day, but no day passes that we make enough progress. It's just the nature of what we do. And so let us get into the implementation phase of the bills that we signed today in our new pro-life agenda, and there will definitely be opportunities to do more in the future, and certainly something that we're going to continue to look for ways in which to ensure that we're making the progress that needs to be made.
Among the bills you listed signing along these lines, I don't think you mentioned postpartum expansion. Is that something you think is going to have a positive impact?
Yeah, so I did not mention that because I signed it a month ago, I think, or maybe 6 weeks ago. It passed during the legislative session once I came out and said that I would sign the legislation. It ultimately got to my desk, and I did, and I'm hopeful that it will help. And I believe that there's a good chance that it will. You know, when we have these conversations, there's no doubt that that sometimes some of these conversations are uncomfortable for those of us in the political sphere. And what I would tell you about the postpartum care, and we tried very hard to accumulate data. And one of the things that we have figured out, and we certainly figured out during COVID, but it's been true since, and that is the State Department of Health and the state plan is really not set up in such a way where we have very good data at the State Department of Health. And I actually met with Dr. Edney as recently as this past Friday afternoon, and Dr. Edney and I strongly agree that that's one of the things that has to be improved. And to his credit, and to the credit of everyone on the board of the State Board of Health, they passed and enacted a plan on Friday or Thursday, whenever the Board of Health meeting was last week, in which they are going to improve that process. And they have agreed to hire a consultant to allow for long-term the state plan to do a much better job of capturing data and having that data available so that policymakers in the legislature and the executive branch have access to information. The postpartum issue is one that, as you well know, it's when COVID-19 hit, the federal government, acting through CMS, mandated that everyone that was covered by postpartum, and by the way, in Mississippi, there is presumed eligibility for Medicaid for every expectant mother. And so let me just say that again. There is presumed eligibility for every expectant mother. And so if there is if there's someone out there that finds themselves in a situation in which they are pregnant, there is presumed eligibility for Medicaid. Now, historically, the only real way to get that coverage was to go to the local ER. Because there was very few pathways through which they could navigate that process. We're working to improve that at the division and otherwise. But when COVID hit, CMS said that every mother that is on Medicaid was entitled to 12 months of postpartum care. And so what I was hoping as we moved into the 2023 legislative session is that we would have some data on and some statistics on, has that fact that all of those Medicaid moms in 2020, 2021, 2022, and now the beginning of 2023, have we seen improved outcomes? And what we find is that we don't really have significant data. But it certainly stands to reason that if those moms in month 3 or month 4 or month 5 are going back to their physician, and that the baby is going back to a physician and getting care, I certainly think that it stands to reason that we have hope and we have optimism that those outcomes will improve. But yeah, I did mention that particular bill earlier today because I signed it, I think, 6 weeks or so ago. Emily.
Governor, I listened to Brandon Presley's campaign the other day, and he talked about...
I wouldn't recommend that.
he talked about how he considers himself pro-life as well, and he thinks that a broader Medicaid expansion would fit into that. I wanted to ask you again, I don't think you've changed your position, but could you talk about whether you think a broader expansion of Medicaid would be a pro-life position? Well,
I will say this. I'm glad to hear that he is pro-life and continues to be pro-life. I know that there are a lot of potential donors to his campaign that really want to come after the state of Mississippi this year, and because we were at the forefront of overturning Roe v. Wade, and I anticipate that will occur, with respect to the overall expansion of Obamacare in Mississippi, I have not changed my position. I continue to believe that it is not the right path for the state. In essence, I believe that adding 300,000 additional people to welfare in our state is not the right approach for Mississippi. And so my question is always, if we have approximately 800,000 people on Medicaid today, and if those individuals, some of whom are in the room maybe, want to expand that by 300,000 more, why is, if a quarter of the population of Mississippi is not the right number, why is a third of the population in the state of Mississippi not the right number? Why shouldn't it be half of the population? Why shouldn't everybody in the state be on Medicaid? And by the way, there are people in this state that think that they should, because they believe we ought to have single payer health care. They believe that we ought to have one payer in the United States of America, and that ought to be the government. I don't believe that. I don't believe that's what's in the best interest of health care of those that are currently on Medicaid, nor do I believe that's what's in the best interest of those who are not currently on Medicaid. You see, there are those who believe more government benefits are always the answer. I actually believe something different, and that is I believe more opportunity for individuals to be in the workplace and providing for themselves and their families is the answer. And that is the solution. And oh, by the way, nobody wants to write about it a whole lot. I understand why, but really I don't understand why, but we're actually winning in Mississippi when it comes to that as well. The most recent data shows we have the lowest unemployment rate in the history of Mississippi, 3.7%. But not only do we have the lowest unemployment rate, because look, I'm an old economics major. It was from a little small liberal arts college here in Jackson, but I'm an old economics major, and I recognize that you can kind of shift a little bit what that unemployment rate looks like based upon how many people are actually in the workforce. But what you can't fudge is how many people are actually working. And in Mississippi, we have just shy of 1.2 million Mississippians working, which puts us today wherein Mississippi has more people working than at any time in our state's history. And it's not just that we have more people working than any time in our state's history, we also have those individuals on average are making almost $8,000 per year more than they were making when I became governor, which is almost a 20% increase in per capita income in our state. Why is that happening? Because we've led the charge and led the effort, and we've worked with our legislators to improve workforce development and workforce training, and now we're focused on training Mississippians for the jobs not of the last 50 years, which paid here, but the jobs of the next 50 years, which pay here. And we're going to continue down that path, and I look forward to a very, very good dialogue over the next 6 months on those topics.
That's Governor Tate Reeves speaking to News Media Wednesday. We should know what Brandon Presley had to say about some of his election opponents' comments. Quote, when Tate Reeves finally wakes up and wonders why rural hospitals are closed, he needs to look in the mirror. As governor, I'll have the backbone to expand Medicaid, so we can end Tate Reeves' health care crisis and keep our rural hospitals open, provide health care for 220,000 working Mississippians, and create thousands of good-paying jobs, end quote. We'll hear more from Presley and Reeves as the election season unfolds. Up next, the fate of House Bill 1020 when Mississippi Insight continues. As Governor Reeves faced a deadline for his review of legislative bills on Friday, one bill he signed is House Bill 1020. The bill expands the boundary lines of the Capitol Complex Improvement District up to Northside Drive. It gives Capitol Police primary jurisdiction within those boundaries after lines expand on July 1st, 2024. And it sets up inferior municipal courts within the CCID served by appointed municipal judges. Support of the bill split along party and racial lines. The majority of debate consisted of black representatives arguing that this bill disproportionately impacts the majority black population of Jackson.
What I will tell you is I will repeat what I said when I was here a few weeks ago or a few months ago. I anticipated that House Bill 1020 was filed with the best of intentions, but is often the case, a bill, particularly one that is as closely monitored as that one, as it goes through the process, while the process is not particularly pretty, the bills tend to improve as they go through the process. I will tell you that House Bill 1020 certainly fits that. It improved through the process, and we'll make a final decision as we get towards the end of the week. But I will tell you this, law and order is critical. Law and order is critical in any growing community. Jackson has so much potential. Jackson has so much potential. I've lived in Jackson for almost a third of my life, and I want what's best for Jackson. But for us to continue to see young kids getting killed in the streets, for us to continue to see property crimes that are happening here that are causing businesses to leave, we've got to make sure that we have law and order. And I don't think there's any doubt that if you talk to businesses, if you talk to the residents of Jackson, Capitol Police shows up when there's a crime being committed and they're called. And I think one of the provisions of 1020, which allows for the state to take over the 911 system in that piece of the city that is the Capitol Complex Improvement District, I can assure you, again, that's an example of an improvement of the bill throughout the process. And what I can assure you of is that if Commissioner Tyndall and Chief Lucky are running the 911 system in the CCID, if there is a call, Capitol Police will show up.
Black lawmakers say that they are working on challenges to the new law in state and federal courts. When we come back, a reprieve for residents in Jackson as garbage pickup slowly comes back online. Mississippi Insight is back in a moment. Last week, we gave you a taste of the bitter stalemate among Jackson leaders on garbage services and what a difference a week and a judge have made. Richards Disposal has returned to city garbage routes following a deal late Monday to set up a 12-month emergency contract. The city council approved that contract the following day, ending for now a crisis that had gone on for more than 2 weeks. The deal came out of talks behind closed doors upon adjournment of a special judge's hearing Monday. In the council's lawsuit against Mayor Chukwuemeka Lumumba, and Chancellor David Clark rendered his final judgment, dismissing the suit, but not without a few barbed at city leadership as a whole.
It's a great example of failure of leadership all the way around. When leaders won't talk to each other, when leaders won't cooperate, when there's no give and take, when there's no compromise. Politics is all about compromise. If you don't want compromise, what you have is a dictatorship. And we decided, we being the United States of America, decided many, many years ago, centuries ago, we did not want a dictator. But yet that's what we have. A government that's trying to determine who is the dictator and who pays for that. So I'm going to deny your motion to stay the proceedings. And like I said, until I get an appropriate motion, I guess we'll wander through the wilderness here.
That special Judge David Clark. 12 News' Leah Williams has more on the emergency deal and Jackson leaders' reaction to it.
During mediation, leaders were able to come to an agreement for a 1-year, $800,000 a month contract with Richards Disposal. Council members say this deal saves the city about $2 million.
The residents should not expect that all of the trash that they have accumulated over the better part of 2 weeks can be collected in one day, on your normal day.
They are going to have a formula and a strategy on how they pick up the garbage. It's almost will be like what happens when there's a natural disaster.
But it isn't over just yet. Since the contract is only temporary, city leaders still have to reach an agreement on a vendor for a long-term contract.
Are there still things that we got to flush out and talk about? Yes. And, you know, when it was made abundantly clear that the judge was not going to deal with those matters today, then we knew that the best thing for us to do was to compromise.
As of right now, leaders have not come together to figure out their next moves going forward to avoid being back in the same situation next year when this contract ends.
It was not all sunshine and roses between Richards Disposal and the city this week. The company is asking the judge to reverse the council's no vote on a 6-year contract. We're back in a moment. If you have comments or questions about today's show or a suggestion for an interview or segment, just drop us a line. Email our producers. The address is news@WJTV.com. We're back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown from all of us here at 12 News. Make it a great weekend.